You meet someone. He's charming, mysterious, magnetic. You feel seen, for a moment. And then, just as quickly, he pulls away. The warmth vanishes. You're left wondering if it was ever real. And somehow, that makes you want him even more. Why is it that emotionally unavailable men have such a powerful grip on us? Why do we chase after the ones who can't, or won't, truly love us back? Carl Jung didn't live in the age of dating apps or ghosting, but his work answers this question in a way that cuts to the core. Jung believed that we are not drawn to people randomly. Our attractions are mirrors. Every relationship is a reflection of what's hidden inside us, especially the ones that hurt the most. Because the truth is, you're not just chasing him, you're chasing a part of yourself. And that's where it all begins. The seduction of emotional distance. Let's face it, emotional unavailability can be intoxicating. It triggers something primal, something ancient. And it's not always about lust. It's about yearning. The ache of almost. The hope of maybe. Carl Jung would call this the activation of the shadow, the part of ourselves we reject or disown, but that still lives within us. When we meet someone who's distant, inconsistent, or emotionally blocked, it activates our desire to be chosen, to be worthy, to fix, to heal. But here's the twist, it's rarely about them. What we're really trying to fix is an old wound, one that predates the relationship by decades. Sometimes, it's a distant father. Other times, a love that was never quite safe. Somewhere deep inside, we learned that love had to be earned. That love wasn't free, it was a chase. So when an emotionally unavailable man enters our life, he doesn't feel wrong, he feels familiar. He reminds us of what we unconsciously believe love should feel like, uncertain, unstable, and just out of reach. This is the hidden power of emotional unavailability. It doesn't repel, it attracts. Because the unfinished stories of our childhood don't just disappear. They find their way back to us, through people. And the more they pull away, the deeper we fall. Projection, falling in love with your own shadow. One of Carl Jung's most profound ideas was this: we don't see others as they are, we see them as we are. In other words, much of what we believe we love in someone else, is actually a part of ourselves we've disowned, hidden, or forgotten. This is the psychological process Jung called projection. So what happens when you fall for an emotionally unavailable man? You're not just falling for him. You're falling for what he represents, a piece of your own unconscious mind projected onto a living, breathing human. That mysterious aura, the deep emotional distance, the cool detachment, it mirrors something inside you. Maybe a part of you that's scared to be vulnerable. Maybe a part that's afraid of intimacy. Or maybe even a part that never learned how to receive love unless you had to fight for it. You project your longing onto him. Your fantasies. Your hope. Your healing. You imagine that if he could finally open up and choose you, it would prove something. That you're worthy. That you're enough. That love doesn't have to be painful. But here's the painful truth, you're chasing your own shadow in someone else's body. He becomes the stage. You become the storyteller. And your inner child becomes the audience, desperate for a different ending. Jung warned us about this kind of unconscious relationship. He said, when an inner situation is not made conscious, it appears outside as fate. In other words, what we don't understand within ourselves, we recreate in the world, over and over again, until we finally get the message. So maybe it's not that he's irresistible. Maybe it's that your wounds are begging to be seen. And he's just playing the role. The anima and animus, understanding the inner balance. Carl Jung taught that every human being holds both masculine and feminine energies within. He called these inner forces the animus, the masculine side in women, and the anima, the feminine side in men. These are not about gender roles. They're about emotional balance. The anima and animus represent qualities like strength, compassion, wisdom, assertiveness, emotional intuition, clarity, and depth. When these qualities are in harmony within us, we develop balanced relationships, with ourselves and with others. But when they're wounded or unbalanced, they begin to show up in our relationships in ways we don't expect. So, let's say a woman keeps attracting men who are emotionally distant. Men who never fully open their hearts, who hold back, who create emotional confusion. On a deeper level, this might reflect her inner relationship with masculine energy. Maybe, growing up, she experienced authority or protection as cold, harsh, or unavailable. Or maybe she was taught, directly or indirectly, that men aren't emotionally expressive, and love has to be earned. So now, unconsciously, she continues to be drawn to emotionally distant men. Not because she wants pain, but because her soul is trying to heal something. Jung would say, that emotionally unavailable man represents your inner animus, a part of your psyche that needs your attention, understanding, and balance. And instead of looking outward, chasing someone to complete you, you are being called to look inward and restore that balance within yourself. Ask yourself, do I give myself the safety and stability I seek from others? Do I value my emotional needs, or do I suppress them? Am I expecting someone else to fill a space that only I can truly heal? These aren't questions of blame, they're questions of growth. Because emotional healing doesn't begin by fixing others. It begins by recognizing where we've lost connection with ourselves. And when that connection is restored, something powerful happens. We stop craving the unavailable. We stop chasing people who mirror our emptiness. We begin attracting relationships that reflect our inner peace, not our hidden pain. That is the deeper meaning of Jung's animus and anima, to know ourselves so deeply that we stop searching for wholeness in others, and discover it within. Attachment wounds and the illusion of control. There's something deeply unsettling about loving someone who keeps you at a distance. You never know where you stand. One moment you feel close, the next you feel invisible. But here's the strange part, many people feel more alive in that chaos than in calm, stable love. Why? Because unpredictability triggers something deep within us, what psychologists call attachment wounds. Carl Jung didn't use modern labels like anxious attachment or avoidant attachment, but his work aligns with the same core truth: our earliest experiences of love shape how we relate to others. If, as a child, you had to work hard for attention, if love felt conditional, if emotional safety was inconsistent, you may have internalized the idea that love is supposed to feel like uncertainty. So when you meet someone emotionally unavailable, it doesn't feel wrong, it feels familiar. This is where the illusion of control comes in. On the surface, you might tell yourself, if I just say the right thing, if I'm patient enough, if I love him harder, he'll finally come around. But underneath that hope is a deeper fear, the fear of being unworthy unless someone else chooses you. Carl Jung would call this the power of the complex, an emotional knot tied in childhood that keeps getting triggered in adulthood. When we're caught in a complex, we react instead of reflect. We don't see the other person clearly, we only see our own wounds trying to heal. And here's the danger, this cycle becomes addictive. The highs of attention followed by the lows of silence mimic the emotional roller coaster of early attachment. It keeps you chasing the reward of being seen, even if that reward comes with pain. But here's the truth, you're not in love with the man. You're in love with the possibility of healing something old through him. You think that if he finally gives you the love you crave, it will fix the part of you that still doubts your worth. But that's a burden no relationship can carry. Healing doesn't happen through someone else's approval. It happens when you finally stop outsourcing your worth, and return it to yourself. The emotionally unavailable man isn't the solution. He's the trigger that points you back to the work. The shadow of self-abandonment. Carl Jung's concept of the shadow is central to everything we've talked about so far. The shadow isn't evil. It's not some dark, scary force lurking in your subconscious. It's simply the part of you that you've hidden, denied, or rejected, often to survive, to be accepted, or to protect yourself. And for many people, especially in relationships, the most painful shadow isn't anger, jealousy, or fear. It's self-abandonment. When you're drawn to someone who is emotionally unavailable, your first instinct might be to try harder, show more love, be more patient, prove your worth. But in that effort, something tragic often happens. You stop showing love to yourself. You ignore your needs, silence your feelings, and override your intuition. You begin to tolerate confusion, neglect, mixed signals, all while telling yourself, this is love. This is just what love feels like. But deep down, you know better. Jung would say that this is the moment your shadow is trying to speak. Not through words, but through discomfort. Through the inner tension between what you truly deserve and what you're accepting. And until that shadow is faced, it continues to run the show, quietly, silently, unconsciously. You might ask yourself, why do I keep ending up with people who hurt me? Why do I stay when I'm not being emotionally fed? Why does loneliness with someone feel more painful than being alone? The answer isn't weakness. It's unhealed pain. Self-abandonment happens slowly, quietly. One ignored red flag at a time. One silent dinner. One broken promise. One night waiting for a reply that never comes. And every time you choose them over your own peace, you reinforce the idea that your needs are secondary. But the shadow doesn't go away just because you ignore it. It waits. It waits for the moment you finally say, I deserve better. That moment, that quiet, internal shift, is when healing begins. It's not about blaming the other person. It's about finally choosing yourself in a world that taught you love must come from outside. Because real love begins when you stop abandoning who you are to keep someone else. Breaking the spell, awareness as the first step to freedom. There's a moment, sometimes quiet, sometimes heartbreaking, when you finally realize, this isn't love. It might hit you after another unanswered message. Or when you feel the exhaustion of trying to decode someone's silence. Or maybe it dawns on you while watching other people love each other freely and openly, without games, without confusion. That's the moment the spell starts to break. Carl Jung believed that awareness is the most powerful force in transformation. Once something becomes conscious, it no longer controls you from the shadows. When you see the pattern, when you name the wound, when you finally admit that it hurts more to stay than to leave, that's the beginning of true freedom. But breaking this pattern doesn't always feel like victory. Sometimes, it feels like grief. Grieving the version of love you thought you had. Grieving the fantasy. Grieving the part of you that stayed hopeful even when it hurt. And that's okay. You're not weak for loving someone who couldn't love you back. You're not foolish for seeing potential in someone emotionally blocked. You're human. And your heart was trying to find healing in the only way it knew how. But now you know better. And now comes the most powerful question you can ask. What was I truly seeking from him, that I've been denying myself? Was it emotional safety? Was it being truly seen? Was it feeling chosen? When you identify the true longing, you take your power back. Because then, you can stop chasing it in others and start nurturing it within. That's what Jung meant by individuation, becoming whole. Reclaiming every lost piece of yourself. Making peace with your past. Meeting your needs directly, instead of outsourcing them to someone who was never capable of fulfilling them. Breaking the spell isn't about anger or revenge. It's about waking up from a dream you didn't know you were in, and choosing a life where love doesn't hurt more than it heals. And that choice is yours now. Healing through inner integration, becoming whole again. When you finally stop chasing the emotionally unavailable, something strange happens. At first, there's silence. Stillness. Even loneliness. You're so used to the chaos, the overthinking, the highs and lows, the unpredictable messages, that peace feels uncomfortable. Almost boring. Because when you've been caught in emotional drama for so long, stability can feel like emptiness. But that's not emptiness. That space. And in that space, something powerful can grow, self-connection. Carl Jung called this process integration. It's the heart of his philosophy. Integration means bringing all parts of yourself into harmony, the wounded parts, the forgotten parts, the strong parts. Instead of hiding your pain or pretending to be okay, you finally listen. You begin to understand what each emotion is trying to tell you. Instead of asking, "Why won't he love me?" you begin asking, "Where have I stopped loving myself?" You stop trying to force someone to open up, and instead, you open. To yourself. This isn't about self-help cliches. It's about real emotional repair. You begin to nurture your own needs. You create emotional safety within your own mind. You speak to yourself with the compassion you kept hoping to receive. You begin to recognize the difference between being attracted to someone, and being aligned with them. The truth is, emotional unavailability in others often mirrors a part of ourselves that we haven't yet accepted. The man who avoids intimacy might be reflecting your own fear of being truly vulnerable. The man who withdraws might mirror your own instinct to protect your heart at all costs. Jung's work teaches us that healing is not about deleting the past, it's about integrating it. Understanding it. Forgiving yourself. And growing beyond it. Because once you see the pattern, once you really see it, you can no longer pretend it's not there. And that awareness is not weakness. It's power. It's the first real sign of emotional maturity. And it's the first step toward attracting a love that doesn't hurt, confuse, or leave you guessing. A love that matches your growth, not your wounds. The power of choice, you are not bound to your patterns. One of the most liberating truths Carl Jung ever shared was this. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. That one sentence holds a lifetime of wisdom. It means that your pain isn't punishment. Your patterns aren't destiny. And your attraction to emotionally unavailable people isn't proof that you're broken, it's a sign that something inside you is ready to be healed. You see, the moment you become aware of a pattern, you're no longer its prisoner. You're at a choice point. You can go back to the familiar cycle, chasing what hurts, explaining away silence, calling pain love. Or you can pause, and choose differently. You can ask, what part of me still believes love should be earned? What part of me fears being loved too easily? Why does distance feel safer than closeness? Because once you see the pattern, you hold the power to break it. You may have been taught that love requires suffering. That attention must be earned. That you have to be good enough to be chosen. But those are not truths. They are scripts, inherited from childhood, shaped by culture, passed down through generations. And now, you have a chance to rewrite the story. To choose peace over chaos. To choose clarity over confusion. To choose someone who meets you where you are, not someone who keeps you stuck in who you used to be. You are not destined to relive the same emotional disappointment. That's not fate. That's habit. And habits can change. Jung's work isn't about blaming the past. It's about becoming conscious of it, so that you can create a future that reflects your growth, not your wounds. The truth is, the emotionally unavailable man was never your final destination. He was the teacher. The mirror. The awakening. And now, the lesson has been learned. Now, you get to choose what love feels like from this moment forward. Not a chase. Not a wound. But a reflection of the wholeness you've begun to reclaim. From wounds to wisdom, reclaiming your inner power. Healing doesn't mean you'll never be drawn to the same types of people again. It means that when you are, you recognize it, and this time, you respond with wisdom, not wounds. This is what Carl Jung meant by individuation, the process of becoming whole. Of meeting your pain with presence. Of listening to your fears without letting them decide your future. Of walking toward love, not with desperation, but with discernment. Because when you've done the work, everything changes. You begin to see emotional unavailability for what it really is, not a challenge to conquer, not a puzzle to solve, but a red flag. A boundary. A sacred no. You no longer feel the urge to prove yourself to someone who can't meet you. You no longer see silence as mysterious, you see it as misalignment. You no longer confuse longing with love. And that is growth. That is power. And most importantly, that is peace. You start showing up differently in the world. You hold eye contact longer. You speak softer, because you're no longer fighting to be heard. You feel safer in your own skin, because you're no longer outsourcing your value to someone who didn't know how to hold it. And here's something beautiful: once you embody this shift, you begin attracting people who feel like peace. People who meet you with presence. Who don't run from closeness. Who listen. Who love without conditions. But they don't come until you stop chasing the ones who don't. The emotionally unavailable man once felt like everything you wanted. But now, he feels like everything you've outgrown. And that's how you know the healing is real. Not because you've forgotten. But because you've transformed. And transformation is the most powerful thing a human being can ever experience. Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And maybe this pain, this ache, this lesson, this man, was the doorway. The question is no longer, why doesn't he love me? The question now is, how deeply am I ready to love myself? Wholeness was never out there, it was always within. You've searched. You've chased. You've tried to understand why someone so emotionally distant could hold such power over your heart. And now, you see it clearly. It was never just about him. It was about everything he represented, the parts of yourself you abandoned, the love you never received, the version of yourself you believed you had to become to be enough. Carl Jung didn't promise an easy path. But he did promise a meaningful one. One where your suffering becomes your awakening. Where your heartbreak becomes your compass. Where every emotionally unavailable relationship you endured was quietly guiding you, not to another person, but back to yourself. This is the real transformation. When you stop waiting to be chosen, and choose yourself instead. When you stop seeing love as something you earn, and see it as something you deserve. When you stop trying to fix someone else, and begin the quiet, courageous work of healing your own heart. You are not too much. You are not too sensitive. You are not unworthy. You are simply someone who loved deeply, before learning how to love wisely. And now, with everything you've seen, everything you've felt, everything you've survived, you're not just healing. You're awakening. Because real love doesn't start with someone choosing you. It starts with you, choosing peace over pain, clarity over chaos, and wholeness over the illusion of being incomplete. If this video spoke to your soul, if something in you felt seen, understood, or awakened, this channel is for you. Here, we explore the depth of Carl Jung's wisdom not just through theory, but through the emotions you live every day. You're not alone in this journey. You're not broken. You're becoming whole. So if you're ready to dive deeper into self-understanding, healing, and emotional transformation, subscribe now.